one area of your life needs cleaned up, and another area is casting doubt and confusion about that. This lunar cycle is under KRITTIKA Nakshatra, and the easiest way to describe Kritika is like this. Think of a butcher knife cutting away everything until there's only the bone, like cut to the bone. So there's nothing left except the bone. So it's about cutting away. It's also about our attachment to the divine. So think of a cord, right? An umbilical cord, like us to the divine. And so what Kritika is about, and what this next 2 weeks is about, is our connection and cutting away all of that which impedes our connection. KRITTIKA Nakshatra is called the catalytic activator. You can think of it in two symbols. The first is a sharp object, so a knife, a razor, but something that cuts through, cuts to the bone. The other symbol is fire, something that can nourish or something that can burn, destroy, purify. So Kritika is about cutting away the superfluous, cutting away the impurities. And then the fire, the same thing. You're burning away the impurities. And the point is to get to a state where you are aligned with your divine purpose. And what makes us not aligned with our divine purpose? First of all, think about when you are in alignment with your divine purpose, when your life does feel right. How do you feel? You feel light, you feel easy, you feel in your flow. And when does it stop feeling like that? When you're overrun by your thoughts, when you're overrun by your emotions. And so Kritika is about cutting those items away and looking at them for real, not in a way that humors you, not in a way that makes you feel nice about it, but looking at things for the critical, harsh reality that they are, and cutting away the impurities so that you can return to the state of your divine nature. When you think of Kritika, think hot, cut, and clean. Some traits of Kritika people are dynamic, strong-willed, critical attitude, straightforward. They have a regal aura about them, a sharp tongue that seeks perfection, but it's not vengeful. These are people who want you to look at yourself rationally, have an inner stability rather than be reactive to outer circumstances, get complete control over your animal nature, maintain the ethical code of conduct that you deem to be correct, and maintain purity of that code of conduct by not succumbing to urges or losing control. And so here are some ways that it expresses. First is through the body. Again, think hot, cut. These are Kritika women and men. Clean, Florence Nightingale. Her entire theory of nursing was sanitation. Give the soldiers baths, clean the facilities, create hygiene, have fresh air. And of course, in her time, she encountered men who didn't think that a woman would know how to do this. And a feature that I continue to find in Kritika has to deal with gender expectations, gender roles, and sexuality. So continuing on the theme of clean, Kritika native women talk about their bodies, and they talk about nutrition, and they talk about how in order to have a healthy body, it needs to be clean on the inside. And so they talk about aging, social expectations, what women's bodies look like, how women feel about themselves, and they begin to incorporate this sage-like, this connection with the higher self. So what the world sees of you versus who you really are. And so this is communicated through how you feel about yourself through your body, how you're seen in society, how women should feel about themselves, how women are made to feel about themselves, and to reorient the way that women feel about themselves in order to reconnect them with their power. So in true Kritika nature, the basis below what's happening on Earth is to connect you with your divine nature. Kritika is about differentiation, and it's about the one that lights the way. Think about a torch, the one who goes first, the one who shows others the way. It's associated with language. Kritika natives invent languages that are used. And the reason that languages are invented by Kritika natives is because they understand, they have the divine knowledge, and they also have the awareness that they have the divine knowledge. And so those languages those modes of communication that are currently intact in the world won't do for them because they have to go first. They have to light the way. They have to show others the way. And this is what Kritika is about, is having a critical perspective, putting together the realities of situations in ways that other people hadn't seen that reality, and then presenting it to the masses. Kritika is associated with Agni, fire, and Agni has to do with digestion as well, so digestive fire. Think about critical thought. Critical thought is not putting together, when I make these videos, I don't put together things and then put them in a certain order. It can't work like that. It's the same with anybody who performs critical thought. You pull together different information, and people have seen this information, they've thought of it, but you put it together, you digest it. You digest it, you think about it, and the product that comes out is something different. So it's not the sum of what goes into it, but in fact, it's a different product. And that's the way that Kritika works with the Agni, the fire, is that there's a purification. So you're looking at all of these things and you're purifying them, you're cutting them down to their most basic levels and then presenting them to people for other consideration. Now, something about critical thought and something about people who perform critical thought as part of their life path. These are not people who have an easy go at it. These are not popular opinions to have. These are things that don't go over well at a dinner party. But these are things that are the path of Kritika natives. Their job is to show us ourselves in the truest light, to see flaws and shortcomings, but in so doing, we get to know the truth instead of walking in ignorance. So we're walking in light instead of in darkness. There are different ways that people connect with the divine. This can be through art, this can be through verbal language, this can also be through dancing. And Kritika natives are known for their very body-oriented dancing performances. And the function of Kritika to overcome our animal urges is also indicated with the fact that a lot of these natives will have tribal, animal-like themes in their performances. But you'll notice the same qualities here, that these are people who are original in what they're doing. They're not taking their ideas from anybody. People take ideas from them. They are the ones who create the original path. They are the ones who create a new language in whatever it is that they're doing. A really prominent theme is, of course, overcoming one's animal-like nature. And two Kritika Sun natives are Marcus Aurelius, who's known for Stoicism. Stoicism is the idea of a really regimented, harsh life in order to establish discipline. And it's about cutting away the superfluous so that you only focus on what it is that you're doing. Che Guevara talked about when he and others were surviving in the wilderness, when they're cut off from society, and how difficult it was without any of modern comforts, how they began to feel like animals. And it was only through the strictest dedication to what their work was and that mental adherence, that stoicism, that they could retain the elements that made them feel human. So Kritika is about being virtuous in whatever code of conduct you have adopted. And it's about being about your work, focusing on your work, and it's looking at what is in the way of you operating in your divinity. Kritika is associated with the deity Shiva, which gets to the truth by cutting away what is not true. More specifically, the function of this deity is to cut away at the ego, to cut away and always dissolve the ego. Because what is it that's stopping us from understanding what is true and what isn't true? Usually it's our emotional attachment to something. It's our attachment to what we think a family should be. It's our attachment to what we think a work company owes us. It's our attachment to what we think a government should do for us. It's not actually what happens, it's our mental and emotional attachment to what we think should be. And so Kritika cuts away what should be, so we're looking at only the stark reality of what is. And this is the work of Emil Durkheim, Vladimir Lenin, Max Weber. They are theorists who cut apart and stratify our concepts of society. And when you look at the strata objectively, without emotional attachment, you begin to see something different. So that leads us to people who then begin to live revolutionary lives. And what are considered revolutionary lives are the people who have looked at societies critically, and so Kritika becomes associated with this critical thought and also with this revolutionary thought. So the point of Kritika is to be about our work, to have our connection with the divine, to operate in our divine presence, and to cut away that which interferes with our divine work. And once again, this is not always a fun time. This is not always a fun life that you live if you choose this kind of work. So to illustrate this point, we're going to talk about Rosa Parks. We see nice pictures of Rosa Parks, and she looks like a nice lady who decided to sit on the bus because she was tired after work. That's what the public was sold. However, that's not the reality of what this story is. The reality of this story is that she was a civil rights activist who went through years of nonviolent training because this is what the society looked like. This is what was awaiting her on the streets. And yet she persevered through that. She was not the first person who was selected. There are stories about this. The other Rosa Parks had a child but didn't have a husband, and at the time that was considered something that would have taken the media off track. So that couldn't have been the right person because they need somebody who was essentially flawless in their life, and Rosa Parks better fit the bill. But when she sat down on the bus, that was planned, that had been planned. The attorney who would take it over had planned it. The boycott was already, like all of that infrastructure was already set up, very, very Kritika. Who was in place? All of the structures in place, why each person was in the position that they were, because they could contribute to that work in the best way possible. So everything was very, very carefully done, very carefully orchestrated, first thing. So it wasn't an accident when she sat down. The second thing is, she didn't know if anything was even going to come of that. What she did know is that there were going to be personal consequences, because there are always personal consequences to this kind of work. When you're doing something important in the world, she could have been somebody who was put in jail and just lost her job, and that would have been the end of it. What's not known about Rosa Parks is that after she didn't give up her seat, is that she lost her job. Her husband lost his job, cut off. They had to leave Montgomery, they went to Detroit, and for the next 30 years until they died, neither one of them ever had steady employment again. So we know her now for what her work was, but her life wasn't easy. Nobody rewarded her for doing what she did. So if you are about this work, be about this work and don't look for your rewards. Be like the sun person, be like the Kritika. That's the message. Don't look for your rewards. They're not coming on this earth. If you're doing important spiritual work, that's not necessarily socially valued work. That's not something that people are going to like, that's necessarily comfortable for them to hear. The issues that she was fighting for in the 60s are still very prevalent today. And even watching this video, I'm curious how many people are having reactions just to hearing me say this. But these attitudes are still alive and well. So my point, she didn't know if she was just going to be one more woman who got arrested and then for the rest of her life suffer consequences for having stood up and for having taken the action that she did. She had no idea what was going to happen, just like you have no idea what's going to happen. So are you about your work or are you not about your work? That's what this energy needs you to look at. What is going on? What are the mental and emotional blocks that are interfering with your divine connection, that are interfering with your ability to do your divine work? That's what this energy is asking you to look at. And whatever shouldn't be there any longer, it's asking you to look very closely at that and burn away or cut off what no longer belongs there. Leos, sun, moon, and risings. This new moon energy is taking place in your 9th house, and 9th house has to deal with your perspective. It has to do with religion, philosophy, but it is your view of the world. Right, so 3rd house is your primary information and how you step out into the world in terms of thinking and communicating. And then 9th house is where all of that's come together, and now you're looking down on the world with this worldview that's created. And what the Kritika energy is asking you to do is have a look now at your worldview. and have a look at the religion, the philosophy, the higher education, the experiences, all of the things that have shaped the way that you view the world, that you step into the world, and start to look at those without emotion. Start to look at those in a critical way. Who told you those things? What was the merit of the people who got to talk? What was the merit of the people who got included in the books, in the texts in which you learned? Who said that traveling to this place was better than traveling to a different place? Or it has to do with foreign travel, so going to another place was better than traveling in your home country. Who said that? And it's not necessarily that the ideas are wrong, but the idea of Kritika is to critically examine why you bought that. Like, why you bought what you got sold. And especially when it comes to what your perspective is, because that is going to inform all of the work that you do. That is going to inform the people you talk to, the things that you read, the things that you consume, all of the other things you construct. It's like, it's all based on your perspective. So critically examining your perspective and how it came to be, and how, essentially, like how you came to be, that's what this energy is asking you to do. And there are different ways to create a perspective. There are many valid ways to create a perspective, but we are told that some ways are more valid than others. That's something else to critically examine. Why is it more valid? To what end? Did you do what you did because it was your idea, or because it was somebody else's idea and that's what you were told? That's what you were told were the right steps. That's what you were told was the right way to do something. That's what the energy is about. Like, really look at this stuff. Really look at what constructed your perspective, what informed your perspective, how did you get here, and why did you get here? Why did you take those steps? And again, it's like, it's not always, critical examination isn't anything that inevitably ends in disaster. But when you remove the parts that don't belong, the structure which remains, that's the solid piece. And so that's what Kritika is having you do. That's what the energy is about. Now, for you, look for some kind of deception in your 7th house. 7th house is partnerships, contracts, close one-on-one relationships, like people close to you. So this can be, sorry for you, but this could be your spouse. This could be the people you live with. This could be, it's like these are the people you are around. And 7th house, like you're around them by choice. Like, so it's who you do business with. It's who you do your personal life with. It's who you do like your business life with, but it's who you do business with. Your partnerships. If you're watching this video, you probably have an idea of the transference of energy and the transference of ideas. So the people who are close to us contribute a certain energy to us. And the ideas that, say, like the 5 people closest you have, those also become your ideas. Not to say that you're not individuated and you don't have discussion, but the people you are around, that's kind of who you are too. So if you don't like who you are around, or if they don't represent what your perspective is, that's something to look at right now. Because you do become what you're around. And if your partnerships or your close one-on-one relationships are telling you, no, don't bother with the 9th house stuff, everything's cool, that's how it should have been, that is an element of deception. So for you, I'm not sure how it will show up in your life, but what this chart is saying is don't look for the people who are closest to you to understand what you're thinking about, or to understand if you are looking at your 9th house stuff critically. if you're really examining your perspective and how it came to be, your seventh house associations are probably not going to be very supportive because that's where you have your Neptune. So again, your Neptune is delusion, deception, but things are unclear. So don't look for those conversations to make it more clear. Actually, excluding them is probably a better deal at this point. But what this Kritika energy is asking you to do, once more, is look at your perspective. And what parts of that perspective don't contribute to your divine work. This is a very cool chart. Like, think 2 cycles ago, Ravati, testing, no boundaries, you have to put things in place. Then the last full moon, Swati, it's like, whose program are you running on? So you're being tested, you're in somebody else's simulation, and then this new moon, Kritika, it's nice, it's a knife, cut that away. So we've been tested, we've been seeing what's not us, and now it's time to individuate. Now it's time for it to be us. So all your planets, they're in the 6th house. 6th house has to do with what you do in the world. 6th house is the mundane, it's the everyday. So this is a chart about getting to work, about looking very closely at what it is you're doing and where it is you're going and how you are organizing your time and your day, how you're getting there. And what is in your way, cut it, purify it, burn it. Like, what shouldn't be there, get rid of it. No attachment to things, no emotion to things, just look at it square in the eye, and what should be there stays and what shouldn't be there, nah, gone. Now the Neptune in this chart is in the 4th house. So the deception, what will happen, or where you're going to get clouded, just like in a general sense, is stuff that it's like 4th house is close to home. So origins, roots, the place you're from. How this can be looked at in a broader sense is you're looking at how you're spending your days. And what you're fighting is the attachment to how you were trained to spend your days. So what your time is supposed to amount to, and what are the small things that you do, what are the rituals that you do in your days, how do you set up your space, like what is your, normally, like people, not normally, but people will go to church or they'll go to a place that is their religious, their religious place. But if you aren't of that, it's your everyday where you're interacting with the divine. You're stepping out into the woods, you're stepping out into the backyard, you're going to have an altar, you're going to have a holy place that you set aside in your home. So 6th house becomes really, really important. How you spend your days and how you spend your energy and how you're directed, because especially if you are, like, if you're watching a video like this, chances are very good that your everyday is magic. Your everyday is a connection to the divine. You don't forget about it. You don't make it a point to do the practice. You don't make it a point to do the practice. It's just what your life is about. So when it comes then to the 4th house stuff, if you live with somebody who doesn't understand that, it becomes harder because it's constantly a battle. It's constantly a negotiation. And then say, like, if you live in an apartment or if you have a yard or anywhere that's shared space, it's a little bit difficult to do your meditation outside when you have neighbors who are staring at you. You see, so it's, in academics, they call it contested space. So it's where people don't always share the same opinions. So you're going about your spirituality in constantly contested space. Back to the chart, what the 6th house looks like is how you spend your days. And you're looking very closely at how you spend your days and what your time amounts to. But the chart is looking at how you spend your days. And the 4th house element, like your Neptune element, is your attachment to what was, the idea of how you should be spending your days, what home should look like, what religion should look like. So it's not that those things are, those things are right for some people, but if they're not right for you, it's not the ideas that need to die, it's your attachment to those ideas. It's okay now just to burn those away, to purify those, to sever those, because that's not where you are anymore. That's not what you're doing. So this is a chart about getting to business, and this is a chart about being about your business. And the 4th house, your roots, your origins, how you were trained, That's where the delusion comes. That's where the disconnect from your emotional attachments to your early training. That's what the chart is highlighting. In terms of if you are going to do a new moon ritual, this is a great one to do because this is the Aries new moon. So this would be the first new moon in the Vedic cycle. Agni, the fire component, absolutely use fire. And this would be a beautiful one to write down your attachments. Write down, and it doesn't have to be a list. It can be squares, it can be small scraps of paper, however you want to do it, however creative you want to get. But where you realize that your thinking was flawed, your instruction was somebody else's idea of how to do it. Any place you understand that you've changed how you're doing things. Because in this chart, your Uranus, it's also in the 6th house, so you're doing things differently. So all of the ways that you're doing things differently, you celebrate those. All of the ways that you were taught to do things that you're not doing them anymore, can celebrate what those have done for you, but then also burn them because they don't have a place in your life anymore. And where you're headed and where your path is headed, you need to be made of different stuff than you were instructed. The people from your past may not understand where you're going and they may not understand your vision. So any attachment that you have or that you've been carrying to what people should understand about you or what those relationships should look like, that's where your delusion lies in this chart. Those are the things now to sever.